Good evening, everybody. It is 5 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time here in beautiful Brooklyn, New York, where it is already dark, and boy, is that dismaying. My name is Max Cohen. I'd like to welcome everyone to the MOCA Live podcast. On the podcast, joining me today as our special guest, the curator and creative director at subjective.art and artist, wearer of many hats, self-proclaimed wearer of many hats, Clay Devlin. Clay, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on.
How's it going, Max? I'm happy to be here.
I'm
I
happy
was
to
just
be here
telling
too,
Max,
man.
everybody, that MOCA Live was my number one Spotify Wrapped podcast today. So this is good timing.
Yeah, that's an absolutely ridiculous thing. I don't honestly think we have enough podcasts for. I think I had like 7,000 minutes of podcasts listened to, and it was all like football and basketball related podcasts. So my life outside of here has nothing to do with art. It's like I need to sterilize myself from artistry. So I just listen to people talk about like football. Anyways, so Clay, I really wanted to have you on this week. It was really exciting to have you on this week for a host of reasons. I mean, we've known each other for quite a while. I really love like how you think and your perspective on things. But somebody on Twitter named Artist Ken was responding to the podcast that Colborne and I recorded earlier this week about Rafiq Anadol and Jerry Saltz's like Twitter beef. And one of the things that Colborne and I had talked about was this idea that crypto art at large and crypto artists within crypto art feel this need to like prove our own legitimacy by like achieving this like mainstream affection. And artist Ken said, quote, when that about like when that criticism comes from outside, when art criticism comes from outside crypto art, like there is no outside. There is only one art world, and crypto slash web3 slash NFTs are part of it. There's no difference. Neither tools or the medium or the ethos can or should separate art from itself. Regardless of the currently trendy mindset, they're somehow separate. All sides need to accept how it's how it is. And I think that you're a perfect person to launch into this kind of a conversation with, because I mean, you work at this kind of intersection, even more than most of us, at like where digital and physical kind of meet. I mean, like I introduced you as, you work at subjective.art, which operates a lot out of Loom Gallery in Manhattan. And I've been to these physical exhibitions that you've put on at Loom where the line between like traditional and crypto art is purposefully not delineated, right? I remember the first time I was there at NFT NYC, there was an exhibition that had artists like Almendra Bertoni with these like intricate physical frames. She also, creates her work as NFTs, and Alec and Jack Busher and Thomas Stokes and Rocket Girl and all these artists who have this kind of dual practice of physical and digital minted work. And I was there for an Una performance piece, and Una is wonderful at kind of mixing this world of like digital and physical, and like probing that line and playing with that line and drawing new elements out of that line. So anyways, I have questions for you. So I thought we could start by kind of going back to this quote from Artist Ken, or this idea from Artist Ken. So how do we incentivize like more crypto art focused people to see themselves as like a part of the larger artistic continuum?
I think
Good question.
yeah, I think it's inherent, and like we just need like a broad realization of that, because like art has always been art. It's evolved over the history of humanity, and we're in our current evolution right now using these new tools, but the communication of feeling to like a receiving of feeling from artwork between people is completely the same. And we're doing it online now, and somehow communicating these things without words, sometimes with words. There's great poets using the blockchain as well, but just art is touching people and continuing to. But it's just a different infrastructure that we're operating on. And I think there's the delineation between the traditional art world and the crypto art world that either exists or doesn't, but feels like it exists a lot of the time. People vying for acceptance in the traditional art world, or traditional artists trying to enter into the crypto art world. But at the end of the day, it's all art, and it's all part of the same conversation.
Yeah. So I want your opinion on why, especially because you have this kind of dual role. You're curating and exhibiting, but you're also making art that is, again, towing this line, or completely crossing the line between physical and digital. But I want to know like why you think there's this reticence on both sides to like marry the two, to see
Mhm.
each other as just facets of the same thing. For my part, I think it's somewhat generational. I think it's like this weird millennial mindset that I feel even in myself as I like, go to a cocktail party and someone asks me what I do, and I'm like, oh, I'm a writer, and they say, who do you write for? And I say, oh, it's this, you know, digital art museum, and they say, oh, is that NFTs? And you kind of feel this need to like prove yourself, say like, no, 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 like I know what you think, but this thing is legitimate, and you
Mhm.
kind of feel the need to like argue your own legitimacy, even though I think we all understand the amount of work we do, the amount of communication we do, the like legacy that's happening here. It's as legitimate as anything else. But hopefully that doesn't influence your answer as much. But like, why do you think that there is this maybe like starting within crypto art, this place where we're both sequestered in, but like, why this reticence to feel ourselves like a part of this larger artistic like world? Like, what are we missing? What do we think we're missing?
Hmm. Yeah, I felt that in ways too, like talking to people in the traditional art world and like speaking about um, being involved with NFTs and crypto art. And there is like a feeling that you need to justify it in a way because you don't know. It's become taboo in for some people over the last couple of
Mhm.
years. I mean, it has gained broader acceptance in a lot of ways, but um, some people still have the perception of like the art that's representative of this movement that was fed to them through like mainstream media, like Bored Apes and People, and whatever you may think of them. There's so much more happening here
Mhm.
that if you just have those as reference points, you I don't know what you're gonna think of this movement as a whole.
Well, you may not even know that there's a movement here, right? You may be
Yeah,
like, you're only seeing the topmost individuals.
yeah.
The top, not topmost, but like, the most prominent, I suppose, or notorious individuals.
Hmm.
Like yeah, they like obscure everything below the surface. When you host like an exhibition through Subjective or at Loom, and you're having these kind of like mixed worlds of crypto art people and non-crypto art people, I mean, is there just like clean and easy interaction between them? Or is there still that kind of underlying need for like party A to prove themselves to party B?
I don't really feel that at the shows. Like once you put people in a room with art that's like curated in conversation with each other, regardless of medium, I think people just feel like they're at an art show rather than like feel like you're trying to sell them some, I don't know, like whatever the perception is of NFTs. I think I don't know. I think it's easy to like see that clashing, but it's still just an art show in New York City that people. That's one of the big things that people do here is like go see new art, and people I think are um, comfortable with digital art at this point and accepting of it, and like seeing the value that they can receive from interacting with it.
Mhm.
Um, So yeah, a lot of what we're doing is just presenting digital art, and a lot of these galleries and museums do as well. So um, yeah, the crypto isn't in like all caps when you walk in,
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
totally.
It's more just like come see some art, meet some of the artists, and just see how it makes you feel, I guess.
So then, could it be a Twitter problem? I mean, there's a million problems that are engendered and continued because everything of this movement seems to happen on Twitter. But
Mhm.
part of the Twitter experience is being siloed in these echo chambers. So if all these crypto art people are only talking to crypto art people, only engaging with crypto art people, only seeing other crypto art, and are not, you know, when Jerry Salt's figure comes in, there's this enormous like vitriolic backlash to whatever point that he's trying to make. Whether that's fair or not, I'm not going to say,
Mhm.
but like, could that be part of the reason that like because you're talking about these exhibitions and you're like, yeah, people are just here to see art. They don't care what the art looks like. They're just here to see art. And it makes so much sense to me that you'd get people in a single physical location And of course, they're not concerned about like what the back end of the art is, how it's being distributed. They're just looking at the aesthetics and appreciating the aesthetics. But of course, on Twitter, you can't unmarry the fact that, I have X amount of followers and they're all people in crypto art. And when I blast out this podcast or a newsletter, it's all going to people who are in crypto art and are not, maybe aware. They're not going to all these shows of not crypto artists, and they're not engaging with those critics and that, think tank of sorts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it is an echo chamber of sorts for sure. Yeah, I don't know. We definitely have this like platform problem right now, I think across the board. Just like fragmentation of like where people are interacting with art and like connecting with each other. And I'm interested to see where like these decentralized alternatives go, because I do think that is a bright future of social media that could be a lot better than what we're working with now with Meta and Twitter and TikTok.
Boo.
And yeah, but there are traditional art people on Twitter. I'd say that's more of an Instagram crowd, but I think it's just important to interface with like the public as a whole, just like coming from a perspective of like sharing new exciting artists and whatever like economic rails those are on,
Yeah.
like
Nope, please.
yeah, it's tough to say. I don't know.
Well, how do you feel like in this role as a curator and an exhibitionist? I know that that's not, what would you even call it? Exhibitor? Anyways, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like, it's a vaunted position, right? Everyone is constantly talking about the need for more curators, right? And you're actually doing that kind of work, and you're doing that work, especially in a sense that brings together the crypto art and the non-crypto art worlds, right? In a place where they touch. Like, do you feel an added weight on your shoulders to accomplish certain things or communicate certain things when you're putting on or putting together these exhibitions because of how, I guess, like vaunted your station is?
I definitely feel like an importance in the work that I do. And I feel very fortunate to be here at Loom and met the owner, Dotan Negrin, who we've been building Subjective together since January. So it's about a year into this project. And I do think we have like a big opportunity to be a bridge between like the traditional art world that exists here in New York and has a lot of power and influence, and the crypto art world that's like what we're all trying to build into, something that exists alongside the like history of art in the whole world. And like we're here in Tribeca, which is sort of the new gallery district in New York. There's like got like Pace Gallery next door and PPOW and Jeffrey Deitch and all these big galleries in the neighborhood. And there's no real presence of digital art. There's some, I mean, there's some people doing great work like Bitforms and then there's like this more experiential side of things like Art Tech House and like Inter, which I see more in like they show some cool work. I went to the Rafik Anadol show at Art Tech House in 2019. But that like kind of ticketed experience is more in the vein of like a museum of ice cream or like these yeah, and it's I don't know, you can present work there in good ways, but reducing art to these ticketed experiences, which I have no qualms with, but the great thing about a gallery is just the openness of to just people being able to come and see the work. But this year I've been fortunate to have a lot of creative freedom with the shows we've created. The goal hasn't quite been to like sell the most work or anything. Like we've shown a lot of unminted work. It's more been just building community and sort of creating a space for these artists to exist in the city and have these group shows. where there hasn't been that much of one in the past. And that goes for digital and physical artists that are kind of tied into this movement. Like I moved to the city and most of my friends were artists that I met on Twitter before I got here. So it's, I don't know, we're all like nodes in this network, and this place has become a hub for a lot of us. So yeah, I definitely feel an importance in the work that I do. And next year, definitely working to create more relationships with collectors and try to build up that side of things and making this a sustainable art gallery in a lot of ways. So yeah.
Yeah, so I don't want to. I'm not. This is not about you or Loom, but I don't want to like shit on people unnecessarily. But at NFT NYC last year, I had a really disappointing experience at the Super Rare Gallery, which I believe was in Soho.
In Soho.
Yeah, I don't remember if it was this past NFT NYC or the one beforehand, but Super Rare had like opened a gallery space, and it was just so uncreative in how everything was put together. It was just screens. The works did not really have anything thematically to do with each other. There was a really cool like osanachi, like it was a wall of infinite objects, all with a different osanachi across the face on it. Love that. But otherwise, it was like there's a piece by Sam Spratt. There's a piece by I think there was a Coldy. There was an Alien Queen, and the pieces were completely disconnected. There was no context between them. It was just like here's an NFT. Like here's an NFT. Oh, here's another NFT, all like in different parts of the gallery. And I don't think it was meant to be an exhibition as much as it was meant to be like a gallery space. But I thought it was a monumental failure, and just it was a really kind of disappointing way to place all these really talented, wonderful artists together without having a link between them. So you are obviously not in the business of doing that, and the exhibitions I've seen that you've put on at Loom, whether that's like the multi-story ones or the multi-story exhibit you had at NFT NYC or the Look, Touch, Own Una exhibition, it was a lot more thoughtful and curated, and there was a vibe, and even coming down to like the color scheme and the music that was being played, like there was an intention there. And I'm curious, like in your opinion, like how do you discern what makes a good IRL exhibition, and like what are the components of an effective exhibition, and does that change when crypto art is involved?
That's a good question. Yeah, I think like Super Rare and spaces like that. I went to FWB Fest in Idlewild a couple months ago, and they had a little gallery curated by OpenSea. And when you have these platforms curating, it inevitably becomes kind of just the top selling artists on the platforms in a lot of cases, and that's really limiting. And I'm very fortunate to have the freedom here to just bring in work that I believe in. And each show is definitely a different vision, and like intentionally so. It sort of depends what the event is. Like NFT NYC, it felt important to showcase a lot of the local community as well. Just like artists engaging with NFTs in New York City. So for that show, I think you saw the 4th and 3rd floors. Those were the ones I curated. There's a lot of physical work. And then we had some screens with some digital work. We did an open call for that, which is the first open call curation I've done, which was a lot of fun with some great submissions. And just trying to find of the moment work that people who are passionate in this space are creating and putting it in the same room. I think there's other shows that have had more intentional themes, like Recursive Reflections, which we did during Freeze Art Week in May, which was focused on artists who've been engaging with AI in their practice in different ways. And with something like that, it's fun because you can show the vast variety with a single through line, but all these artists' work are completely different. Showing like Jennifer and Kevin McCoy's landscape series in Stable Diffusion that they created earlier this year, and Sasha Stiles' Art Blocks project. We did and it's fun doing it in a space like this because you can bring in other components that might be separate from the artwork but could add to the artwork. Like Sasha's project, Still Moving, had an interactive component. So I had the idea to bring in a longtime dancer, a friend of mine, Camilla Arake, and we had like a 15-minute dance performance with Sasha's spoken word over an interactive piece that she made with Nathaniel Stern. And that was a really special like moment in the evening. And things like that you can throw in the mix, like you mentioned, the music, and just trying to make a cohesive like feeling of the experience of being in the space and being with the work. And we do a lot of performances as well. Like the live code community here in New York is like some of the most amazing like artists engaging with technology, but they're completely separated from the NFT space. Some of them are engaged with it, but like it's performance-based coding, like visuals and audio. And I feel like that's important to exist in a space alongside the work that we're doing.
Do you need to have like a really comprehensive through line for these works, not these works, these exhibitions, that you're like communicating? Like when people walk in the door, there's like an explication of what they're seeing and why it's connected? Or is it more like, can you be successful in just kind of like letting that be kind of background and letting people stumble upon it themselves?
I think it can be both. I do like making it apparent when you walk in sometimes. Like at the Recursive Reflections show, as soon as you walked in, there was like a large scale screen before you got into the projection room with a piece by Stephanie Dinkins, who I'm not sure if she's made any NFTs, but she's an incredible digital artist. And it was a video piece of her speaking with Bina 48, who's a like humanoid robot that's been evolving since like 2010.
Wow.
And her and Sasha have both had relationships with this robot, teaching about art and poetry. And so it was like a video of her speaking to the AI robot about like what it is, and the robots telling her very eloquently. I can't quote it directly, but you can look up Stephanie Dinkins' conversations with Bina 48. That just like I'm the real deal. Like I'm a reflection of all humanity has done so far. And the show is called Recursive Reflections because it's like a mirror for humanity, and albeit a flawed mirror because the data is incomplete and can't represent everything we are. But that like felt like a hard introduction to just like make people think about like where is AI going to go, and what are these artists saying with the ways they're interacting with it, I guess.
So what you're talking about is very interesting because it hits on something that I have been thinking about for a long time and don't really have an answer on, which is the art versus the display. Right. And when you have not just an artwork, but a creative way of displaying it, like what you had done with your dancer friend in this performance, kind of coinciding with the Sasha Styles work, like that is both the work, but also an evolution of the work because it includes this different, obviously like performance is not display per se, but we can see one as the evolution of the other, or at least as like, I guess, I don't know, maybe there is no difference. Maybe performance is just another kind of display, but like how important both to you as a curator, but also like to audience interaction or audience feedback do you see of like just the artistry itself versus these display mechanisms? I mean, you mentioned the Rafik Anadol, the ticketed thing at Art Tech House. I also went to that some years ago and I was kind of blown away, but I'm not sure in hindsight if that was as much because Rafik's work was, what was blowing me away, or because it was this, these projectors just shooting projections from every corner of the room and like all this movement and, being kind of encapsulated in that because, the projectors aren't discerning where a person stops and like the wall begins, et cetera, et cetera. Like, I guess I'm just curious about your opinion on this, like display versus aesthetics, how intermingled they are, how important one is versus the other.
And I think they're both very important, but aesthetics can make a bad display feel good. But a good display can do a lot for a work with good aesthetics as well. I think like we're fortunate here to have the like projection space where we can do like full 360 projection mapping, as well as a screen gallery, and for physical art space to hang that. So that's definitely, the display is always in mind when curating the work, because in a space where you're surrounded by the artwork on all sides, I've found that like audiovisual work fits that really well. It has an immersion to it. You're hearing it, you're seeing it all around you, and you just kind of have to sit there and take it in. You don't really have any other option. I mean, you can leave the room if you don't like it. But,
Sure.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, different spaces have different displays to work with. I did a show independently in a church basement earlier this year, in Bushwick, and that was one of my favorite shows I've done. I'm a big fan of shows in non-traditional venues, and that was fun because we showed a lot of physical work in this like classroom, with like a whiteboard, so everyone was drawing on the whiteboard. It felt very interactive, and people were taking into the work. But there was also this wall of like old CRTVs, and showed some work by like Emotional and Squibs and some of my work, and just a bunch of local crypto artists in New York. And those TVs obviously way lower quality than the ones that we work with here, but something about seeing the work in that context added a lot too. So it's tough to say. They're both important, but I think there's interesting things you can do with displays that might feel like they're not the cutting edge of whatever that technology is today.
So is the implication then that certain artists their work is better equipped for exhibition in certain spaces, and that the space itself is going to, in some ways, pre-select what artists are, whose works most like effectively vibe with the physical location? Because obviously we miss that in anything online, because all these platforms display everything exactly the same, and that's no shade to the foundations and super rares and known origins, makers places of the world, but like they all display things exactly the same. Here's your box with the art in it, here's your description, here's your history and your transactions if you'd like to see those, but that's it. And it's generally on like a white background, and it's generally like, here's the frame, here's where the art is. There's no context. It's just, maybe it's by necessity or by the necessity of like the economic realities of hosting a platform. But anyways, I'm just diluting my question, which hopefully you remember.
Yeah. It's about the spaces and how that dictates like what is curated, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I think that is a factor. I mean, spaces have certain screens with certain dimensions or certain projectors, and like back to the projection, like in a space like that, movement and sound add a lot to the experience of being in that room. So that definitely comes into play when thinking about what to show. But at the same time, like a lot of work can be fit into a like 16:9 screen, or just like I don't know. It's not that limiting in that sense, but for certain displays, I'd say it can be. Like where Rafiq's work was displayed in the MoMA, I don't know if they're going to keep that up. I hope so. I'd love to keep seeing more video work there, but I can't imagine they'd display a still piece of digital art on that screen.
I'd love to see more slow art in places like that. Like one of my, I've talked about this before, but one of my favorite pieces of crypto art period is Daim Al-Yad's Ancestral Memories, which is this like very slowly unfolding. It's like this face that is changing, but it only changes once every like 45 seconds or so, and not very gregariously until it, completely morphs over the course of like 6 minutes or so. And like it forces you to like sit and contemplate the work for a lot longer than I think like a Rafiq piece, where you kind of get it. It's constantly moving and it's constantly changing. So even if you like look away for however long, like you're going to come back and it's going to kind of bear vague resemblance to what it did before. but like you were talking about the old TVs, right, in this church basement. That of course makes me think of Sarah Zucker, right, whose work with analog video has to be shown on a screen like that, or you would lose something. It would almost seem too, I would think it would almost seem too technologically advanced in the display, and you lose some, like the physical texture of that artwork, which is so important to be captured on these, like, I mean, it's created using these like old TVs, these old analog devices. But I don't know. I find it fascinating, especially because there's this race to invent just new technology, like better screens, crisper, like crisper actual visuals, and incorporate more graphics cards. And the more that, like again, not to keep mentioning Rafik N at all, but like those pieces can't really be shown on, they can't really be appreciated on like small, like spectacular screens, because they require so much computing power to like really get like the full expression of them. Let's change subjects quickly so I don't keep talking about Rafik N at all.
Send me that piece you mentioned though. This slow art. I agree with you there. There's a lot of really good slow like video art that hasn't really found a space in the market in crypto art quite yet.
I mean, it can't if we're talking about Twitter, like of course it can't, because nobody's looking at, like, even when I look at like the viewership metrics for these podcasts, right? When Twitter tells me how many viewers we had during it, it's like how Twitter defines a viewer as somebody who watches a video for more than 2 seconds. I'm like, if this piece of art is going to evolve over 6 minutes, like no one on Twitter is going to watch that. Nobody. Because it's just not what it breaks from your expectations of the medium. And that's something like why I think so much like of this like new wave, like manic glitch art, a la Xcopy, has become so prominent, because it's perfect for social media, right?
It's the experience we're all having.
Exactly. So, like, what is your opinion on the role of the curator or gallerist in crypto art? And not just, I know we've kind of been slowly discussing that, but as we've kind of started with this idea that there's some kind of like hostility between the traditional, quote unquote, traditional art world and quote unquote crypto art, there's always this hostility. I mean, it's this like weirdly entangled hostility, and then like craving for like these middlemen, essentially, right? Which is, without wanting to sound pejorative, like that's what the gallerist is, right? Or the curator is, right? It is neither it's not the creator of the art, and it's not the buyer of the art or the owner of the art. It's like this kind of middle ground. And obviously in crypto art, there's so much ingrained vitriol towards anything middleman-y, right? So like at this point in time, what is your idea about like the importance of the role of the curator or gallerist at large in crypto art?
Yeah, I think it goes back to like the echo chamber you were talking about before that we kind of are in. And I think curators have an opportunity to help artists break out of that and contextualize their work alongside others, either in the space or not. And I think I really enjoy bringing in work that's not yet interfacing with the crypto art world and putting it in the same conversation as crypto art, just because it's good work, and it should be in conversation with one another. And I think a lot of the community that has come to our shows here, a lot of it is the digital art community, but a lot of it is people that are separate from that, either in the traditional art world or other walks of life, and just getting to experience that art is that inherently valuable, I think. And I'm lucky as a curator to be able to put things in context and maybe make a video piece or any digital art piece have more meaning thanks to the context that it's put in, hopefully. But some of these works stand on their own, obviously, but I think you can tell more of a story however clear the story is, or not. I think it's fun for it to not be clear sometimes, even if there is a through line, and for people to have to like figure that out, like why are all these works in the same room together. And obviously, like, you write a little bit about the show, a little curator statement, but it's something for people to grapple with and just like think about what they're experiencing rather than just like scrolling and be like, oh, that's cool. Like that's, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it can give you a lot more as a experiencer of the art.
Sure.
Yeah.
So how do more people who are interested in curating get connected to a space where like an IRL exhibition can actually come together? Because I mean, maybe there is no solid answer, but like that's obviously an insanely limiting factor to like the number and specificity of exhibitions that we can collectively pull off. Is like, where are these spaces? Who are going to be these individuals who like own a gallery space who are interested in crypto art? How do we reach out to these people? My fear being that if we don't do this, then it'll just be, whoever is wealthiest and most connected, the Sotheby's, the Christie's, the MoMAs, who have the spaces, who have the funds to put together a giant video exhibition. It'll be those folks who are dominating the like exhibition landscape, and all the artists who are their like chosen emissaries are going to further calcify, and I'm just don't want that.
Yeah. I don't know. Like I said, I got very lucky. I had my work curated here a few times last year, and I got to know Dotan, the owner, and he's been wanting to do stuff like this for a long time. And I was kind of bumping him like, you got to do more art shows here because it's a great space for it. And eventually, he was just like, let's do it. And in January, we started putting on at least 1 or 2 shows a month. And I recognize how like lucky that is. I was just walking dogs and doing commissions, trying to live in this expensive city.
This goddamn place.
Yeah. So I really stumbled into it. I had never curated anything before, but I've been involved in this space since 2018, 2019, just as an observer, and just seeing like what's happening here. So I feel like I was prepared for the opportunity, but I definitely stumbled into it. As for people that would like to curate shows, I'd recommend reaching out to the spaces in your area. Just start meeting people who work with galleries, or if there are digital art spaces, which are far and few between, but just be an active member of the community there and get to know people. But in terms of online, I would just get an on cyber space or MOCA room maybe, and curate, just put your vision out there, put all those works in the same space and see how they feel together, invite people to come see how they feel in the space, and reach out. Like, my DMs are open. If you got a cool idea for a show, like, I'd just be happy to look at it. Can't promise anything, but
probably a good time to mention that if you do want to curate a MOCA room, you can use anything. Like it's programmed into each room, and we have free ones available at the playground. Yeah, on the app.museumofcryptoart.com, just click around. But every piece from all of our collections, including the community collection, which I believe as of like 2 hours ago had 9,287 pieces in it, so probably be able to find something to curate. But quick plug for MOCA rooms, which we love. Shout out Untitled XYZ. Shout out Renee Schmidt, our CTO. Okay, so my last question is about your artistry, just kind of like your general through line. But I found this quote from your website, which I loved, which was, "My current work is inspired by feelings of unity derived from the idea that all apparently random systems in the natural world are governed by an obscured underlying order." And I just really connected with that. That's on coincidence.studio, your website. Can you just talk a little bit about that, like in your art or just your curatorial strategy, or just how you came to that?
Yeah, I haven't updated my website in a couple of years, but I still like that.
That's now outdated. You're like, I no longer believe that like we are governed by an obscure underlying order.
No, it remains. But a big inspiration for my work, when I started taking it more seriously in college, I just got kind of obsessed with like chaos theory and fractals, and a big book that influenced me was Chaos: Making a New Science by James Gleick. And chaos theory is like we'll see. I haven't read the book in a while. Hopefully I can explain it well. But essentially, it's a multidisciplinary, like scientific field and mathematical field, um, studying apparently random systems. Like think of you pour your milk in your coffee, that the way it all swirls together, just very chaotic. You can never predict exactly what it's going to look like, but the idea that there's very simple like rules of recursion and a sensitive dependence on the initial conditions of the system when it starts that kind of play out as the system evolves. And fractals are a like visual or kind of representation of this. And that's been a big part of my work, especially my paintings. A lot of them you can see geometric shapes or other like things that I've rendered by my hand that are self-referencing at not an infinite scale, but a suggestion of an infinite scale. Like this gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And I mean, that's like the world we live in. Like we have the macro and the macro universe, the micro, and it's a big world that we're living this life in. And
Hot take.
Yeah, right. And it feels chaotic in a lot of ways at times. It's there's a lot of terrible shit happening. I don't know how to say that. Shit happening in the world, and that like makes you feel chaotic, whether in your mind or what. And thinking about these systems that govern nature, and I think that bleeds over into human interaction and this whole world that we're building. Like everything's happening as it's meant to. Everything's playing out. And yeah, I don't know if I explained that well, but
No, you did. I mean, just a couple of things. One, so I was in Japan for a couple of weeks, and I was in this not tiny, but I was in this like kind of off the beaten path city that not like I don't feel is like super touristy, Nagano City, and it was late, and I was just like looking for a place to eat, and I walked into some random Chinese food restaurant, and of course, there was somebody I knew from home, and it's like it just.
yeah,
I kept thinking, I was like, this is statistically impossible.
yeah,
Like this is actually an impossible occurrence that just happened, just on the topic of like seemingly chaotic events with some kind of
yeah,
weird system. But you were talking about the milk in the coffee thing.
yeah.
For me, that's like, so I love Dunkin' Donuts. I was living in Boston for 10 years. I'm just like a full Dunkin' Donuts apologist. But Dunkin' always does the milk for you in like iced coffees and everything. Starbucks, however, at least in the US, they'll like have the vials, not vials, the carafes of milk outside, and you get to like pour into the coffee and see it like, pour down to the bottom and then float up in those incredible wisps. But anyways, all of which is to say is that it was a wonderful evocation. I appreciate it. Clay, I do not have any more questions for you. This was a lovely conversation. I really enjoyed your insight. Why don't you take a moment, tell folks watching, listening, what you got going on, where they can get at you, what you'd like them to know. Floor's yours.
Yeah. So we're almost a year into building this subjective project. You can follow us on Twitter or Instagram at SubjectiveNYC. Check out some of the shows we've done. Check out some of the artists. And yeah, if you're a collector interested in being involved with an artist or with a space putting on artists and trying to build, feel free to reach out. We're always just trying to form new relationships and bring more opportunities for the talented people that make this place special. So other than that, as for my own art, I'll plug a little showing at Art Basel next week in Miami. So I'm going to be minting my own work for the first time in like a year. I haven't really been focused on that with all the curation, but check it out if you want, and come see me at the Beyond Basel and Scope if you're in Miami.
Rock and roll. Clay, thank you so much. This has been another episode of MOCA Live. If you liked what you heard, we would love if you would give us a shout out or a 5-star rating or a subscribe or a follow on Spotify or Apple. Maybe this is like a little early announcement. We'll have more information tomorrow, but all of these podcasts are now, or at least our archives are now live on Zora to be minted and collected. So we'd love if you would check out our collection on Zora.co. It should be up on the homepage tomorrow. And by the time y'all hearing this on Friday, we should be like rip roaring ready to go. This will be the first like new podcast to like go up on Zora. So we're super excited about that. Shout out Zora. Shout out Yuri at Zora from making that happen. We have a newsletter as well. We'd love for you to subscribe to it. Substack. I'm sorry, museumofcrypto.substack.com. Clay, I'm sorry, I got to do the whole plug. We are Clay Devlin's most listened to podcast of the year. Maybe we can be your most listened to podcast next year. I had a lot of fun, Clay. Thanks so much for coming on. Thank you all for being here, and we'll see y'all real soon.
Thanks so much for having me, Max. It was a pleasure.